Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Kodiak Shack podcast. Today, I have Ary from SimiGon Inc., and we're going to talk to him real quick. But before we get to that, remember, donations are available and sponsorships for episodes are available. So if you're interested in that, the link for donations will be in the show notes. And additionally, if you'd like to sponsor episodes to get your name out there when you're not able to be on the show, then feel free to contact us at info@kodiakshack.com, and we can get you sponsoring episodes so you can talk to people. And now, a word from our sponsor. Crowdbotics Defense is a data analytics software company serving the United States Air Force. They make it easy for active duty servicemen and women to turn their ideas into products and tag team DoD adoption. If you or someone you know has an idea for how tech can speed up your team, increase efficiency, or make your life easier, reach out to Crowdbotics Defense to talk it through. Crowdbotics Defense will help you define your project scope, timeline, and cost, and work with you to secure the budget you need to build it. Any product built and adopted by DoD will be credited to you as the collaborator. Reach out to Julian at crowdbotics.com for help. That's Julian, Julian, at Crowdbotics, CROWDBOTICS.com. Also, there will be a link in the show notes. Everybody I talk to in the DoD sees inefficiencies that could be streamlined or rectified with the hard work of software engineers and people in the United States Air Force. So work with Crowdbotics Defense to make a product that you are proud of and you're happy to work with. Today, we have Ary here to talk about the great work he's doing. So Ary, thanks for being here, and tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Vader. You're too kind calling that great work, but yeah, we're definitely working hard, doing what we can to support the warfighter. Primarily right now, working with the Air Force and Marine Corps, and supporting our big customers, the defense contractors on their big projects. So I've been working at SimiGon Inc. for about 13 years now. Started as director of business development, and eventually moved up to run the BD department. And now, since the merge/acquisition by a company called Maxify Solutions Inc., I run SimiGon Inc. So I'm responsible for the development and program management and BD side. So we're lean and mean, and obviously working hard to grow. And the big space for us is really AR, VR, and also artificial intelligence.
Nice. So what in the AR, VR? So before we get into that, kind of a brief overview. So what's the difference between VR and AR, just so our audience is kind of keeping up with us?
Yeah, so virtual reality, that's like you got your Oculus Quest, Facebook Quest, Meta Quest, excuse me. You get all kinds of different headsets. They're more for depth perception and gaming. Very good, very immersive, and there's different levels of, let's say, fidelity or resolution. There's the consumer grade. Quest is probably the most well known and most widely used, and there's higher end like the HTC Vive, different suites that they have, and then there's Valve has come out with their own headset, and there's super high end companies like Vario and Xtal that have their own headsets. But I would say those are more for professional users versus buying one for yourself or for your kids to play around in the house.
Yeah, and do you guys already have a set device that you're planning on operating off of?
So we're agnostic. So for us, we don't care what headset you want. You're the end user. You tell us which headset you prefer. If you're asking us which one we like, in terms of VR, we like working with the HP Reverb GT, but we have experience working with the others as well. It's just that we see really good results and good frame rates with that, and very crisp resolution. The AR side, I didn't address that question, so we'll circle back to that. Augmented reality is more of like you have superimposed graphics on top of real world. On top of the real world period. And so an easy example to think of would be Pokemon Go game. And so that's, geolocation, the database that, Pokemon is using, and then, superimposing the Pokemon characters on top of real world locations.
Yeah, I remember.
They are. So you remember
Yeah.
that. And then there's
Oh, go ahead.
there's of course the high end stuff, the expensive stuff. I don't know if we can curse on this podcast, so I'll try to avoid
Yeah,
that.
we try to limit it. Yeah.
Try to limit it. All right, so the expensive stuff and like more higher end, that's the HoloLens, the Microsoft HoloLens, the IVAS program. And those are a lot more expensive. I wouldn't call them ready for prime time, at least with the consumers. Then there's, Google Glass is another example of AR. And there's Apple that's coming out with their own headset very soon. We'll see how that's priced. But I think you see with big tech moving into AR and VR, I think this space is just going to blow up. Of course, we want to ride on their coattails, and so we can't be locked into single manufacturer OEM. But there's different standards like OpenXR, Steam VR, and so as long as we support these standards, and the OEMs are working, so their headsets, their hardware work off of these platforms, there should be no problem for the industry to keep up with it.
Yeah, I've had a little experience with VR, looking at some goggles, and you can tell when a higher performing goggle versus a lower performing goggle, and I feel like in my limited experience, a lot of it is in the periphery. So kind of where the focal point of your eye, pretty much everything is pretty darn crisp. But the higher performing, when you throttle up the performance of the goggle, when you kind of look into the edge of your vision, you still get a crisp image, and you're like, dang, that is a high performance machine we got here. The one thing I haven't been able to, yeah, exactly. Well, and it's funny, and maybe a lot of my listeners, and Ary, maybe even you, before you kind of got into the space, a lot of people probably assume like we're going to buy the best thing that you can get. It's like, cool, $15,000 AR or VR goggles, let's do it. And the reality of like, you don't have endless funds, even though you're the DoD and you're the Air Force buying stuff. It's not like you just have a blank check. And a lot of times it's like, hey, we can't afford the best of the best. We want the best of the middle of the road, so it's understandable, because taxpayer dollars and stuff. So we don't want to just waste them. But at some point you want to make sure you get the fidelity and the training that you can get out of these. So as for SimiGon, so you guys are obviously building stuff to work on these. What are you guys creating to help, and who are you creating it for?
So our core business is military aviation training. And so training for air crew and maintainers. So supporting end users like yourself, different fighter communities, F-16, F-15, C-130. Then also the same on the maintenance side, fighters, just different aircraft. We've done F-16, F-15, de-icer technicians, and putting all that in the VR space where the depth perception matters. And maybe jumping ahead of one of your topics, I think it's important for industry to differentiate like where is VR bringing an added value, and so where do you need it? So if I'm providing maintenance training and we're doing cockpit testing, there's no added value to put that in VR. But if you're training them, pulling out LRU panels and changing tires, and you're in the wheel well, then VR comes into play. There's added value. If you're a de-icer technician, de-icing a KC-135, and you're 70 feet up in the air in the boom, depth perception matters, right? So that's where VR and MR or XR comes into play versus standard, more traditional courseware lessons.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've kind of briefly talked to before, but just the cost of some of these things that are already in place to use. So, for the F-16, they have simulators that are multi-million-dollar simulators, and you need 4 people in 4 multi-million-dollar simulators all running together to get some training sometimes, because you need 360 view, because again, in fighters, you can look over your shoulder and everything's a big window. So you need that ability to look back behind you, where VR provides that. It's just on your face rather than like 18 different projector screens on there. So it's definitely the future. I think the problem you run into as an end user with VR, which AR and XR kind of solves, is as an end user, you can't see your real hands, unless your hands are holding something or have some gloves that are in the VR space as well, you can't flip switches. You can't actually see your hands moving the real world switches. I believe, and then correct me if I'm wrong, that's where AR or XR can be leveraged to have you look out the window. It's the VR world. You look in the cockpit, and it's the cockpit and your real hands. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I agree. I think like if you're talking about taxpayers and what makes sense, maybe there's no replacement for domes in the short term, but as you're looking at the amount of money spent to support these legacy systems with those 360-degree domes, and as those start to become obsolete, and you have to replace them. I think that's going to be a key point. The Air Force has to be looking at, and not just Air Force, DoD in general. Maybe mixed reality, the XR stations, headsets are the way to go. That doesn't mean you have to replace the cockpit, because that's good and that's great. And, obviously, as an end user, you need a tactile feedback, true muscle memory. So you don't have that limitation, and then you still have that 360-degree view with the headset on your face. There's a trade-off. Is it 100%? I don't know. That's where there has to be some more studying done, I think, by end users like yourself. Right? What are we getting? What is the delta? Work with industry to close that delta as much as you can. Then that $15,000 headset makes a lot more sense over that $1.5 million dome.
Yeah, for sure. And I maybe it's 1.5, maybe it's like 5 million, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, these numbers are large numbers when you're talking about these sims, and they're amazing sims. I mean, these sims, they connect you. It's like flying the real jet. But it's technology that's been around for a while now, and a lot of it is struggling to keep up with just updating, because it's projectors. So the fidelity kind of isn't always there because it's a projected image onto a screen. So it has its limitations, and I agree. I think the VR, AR, XR kind of space is definitely the future. So with that, kind of what is one of the, because we actually met a couple weeks ago when we were going to do that webinar with Crowdbotics, which was pretty cool. I had a good time with that.
Yeah. Shout out to Julian.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Julian Caps from Crowdbotics. He's a good dude, helping the bros out. But what was you kind of had some screenshots for that? So can you kind of speak to the software that you're developing that you kind of showed at the webinar?
Yeah, so we're talking about a F-15E mixed reality simulation software we developed for the 4th Training Squadron at Seymour Johnson. And so originally, Squadron was using DCS or P3D prepared. They didn't get the fidelity that they wanted, the training that they wanted, and so they put out this RFP, or first an RFI, then an RFP that we eventually won. So providing high fidelity simulation software that went on the existing hardware that they already had purchased, like those PTN style sleds. So we developed the software, had a lot of ups and downs throughout that project. As the project gained more and more velocity, and we're so close to the end, but then as you get closer to the end, it seems like sometimes that the gap between what the end user wants and what you're delivering is bigger. We're able to close that. We're at the last mile. We're so close, but then it could be like this minor bug to us, but to the end user, no, that's a big deal. We need to have that fixed. And so we definitely went the extra mile working with the customer. The customer is great to us. Always very accommodating. I'd say tough customer, but obviously very fair, and definitely cooperating with us as much as they could every step of the way. So it was hard because of just what was going on at that time, COVID and traveling. Some challenges at the time, like some of the technology, mixed reality stuff, it wasn't as mature as we would have wanted it, us or the end user for that matter. We overcame it, but we look at it as okay, this is an innovation program. Did we meet even exceed the scope of work? Yeah. And then it's working together with the end user to take it to the next, get to the next step. And that was the other thing that we talked about in that podcast in that webinar with you, Julian, and Nick. Was about the value of that.
Yeah, that's That's real. That's for sure real.
That's
the
real. It's definitely real.
Well, the one of the things that I feel like, having been an end user, and I can say this now because I think end users, they put in a lot of work, and then what they end up doing is they keep having more insight after writing the contract over
Right.
time. So they're like, hey, but we want this too. And the problem is, like, it can't be a fully rolled out product. It's a min viable product. So I think, what the military members do sometimes is they're like, oh yeah, if we get this, it'll be perfect. And it's like, it's not supposed to be perfect. You didn't pay for perfect. And I think our problem is we are used to everything being a sunk cost. All it is just increased effort. And then we make better products, or we don't. And so
Right.
that's one of the situations where we can't put that upon the cyber companies and say, hey, we want you to go above and beyond, just like we do, to make the best product. Because, to be honest, like, again, we didn't buy the commercial product. We bought a MVP to demonstrate the ability to provide a commercial product. And I think people need to kind of keep that in the front of their mind.
I agree. And I think, since then, I think some of the innovation funding has dried up a little bit. At least on the sim side, on the training side. I think it is going back into DIU now, kind of like in a different way, maybe in different types of programs. But in terms of what you're saying about the MVP, and everybody having to understand what that means, 100%, you're spot on.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, again, nobody's doing it, with malintent. It's just they're like, man,
Right.
we really love the product. It'd be perfect if you did this. So to use AR to create AR or VR, when you're doing that, I mean, if you're looking like in a Strike Eagle cockpit or something like that, are you mapping the cockpit? So like a laser mapped cockpit, so you know where everything is. Like, how do you create AR or XR to work correctly? Because this is kind of alien to me.
Yeah, so what we delivered was a mixed reality environment where the only physical controls were the flight controls themselves, the stick and throttle and pedals. Everything else was virtual. So, but there was a sensor that we had on the headset that allowed the pilots and Wizzos to use their fingers, see their hands inside the simulation. Yeah. So we're on a podcast, so you don't see it, guys. So you put your hands in front of your face, pretend you're pushing buttons, MFDs, and you're flipping switches on the side panels. So you had that ability. Now, was that perfect? Is that tactile feedback? No. But did the FTU students understand and get that? I'd say for sure. Like, there's no tactile feedback. That is, that's what it was never supposed to have tactile feedback, and future versions can certainly support that. So that's, say the lower end of mixed reality where you're seeing your hands and you're able to interact with a virtual environment. And then say the next level, again, and this is just a matter of budget, right? You got the money, then you can put in the real cockpit, put in real buttons, real switches, and you're interacting with that. And the way you do that is through a process called masking. It's kind of like you have a cutout in this area where, say in front of your center MFD, for example, it's a cutout, and you'll be able to see your hands interface with that, with that center MFD. And so that's just, kind of like the magic. And then look up, you're seeing the virtual environment. You're looking at inside that specific space where there's masking, then you're seeing the real world.
So so do they have to wear gloves so they can see their hands in the virtual environment, or like what are they using to actually?
If you're in the mixed reality environment, you do not. In the virtual environment, if you want to see hands without any other kind of sensors, then yes, you would need gloves.
Or I heard there's. Oh, go ahead. Oh, I heard there's the Bebop gloves, I think they're called, and it's haptic feedback gloves. And I never saw them, but they sounded sick.
It's cool. I love all the new tech that's being developed. There's definitely a lot of use for it. It's still, I don't want to say that the product isn't there yet. And I'm not talking about Bebop specifically. I think there's a lot more work let's put it this way. There's a lot more work to be done in convincing end users like yourself that are going to say, sure, I'll wear those gloves in my simulator. Because, the biggest thing is like, no, man, we want to train the way we fly. So I want to see the iPad in my sim, and that's part of what we did in our mixed reality project. So we've got the iPad running in the headset. You don't need to take off your headset. You got your knee board inside the headset. You don't need to take it off to write things down. You see everything inside. Just like basically again trying to train the way you fly. There's no you don't have the same feeling, of course. No vibrations and the speed and the G's.
Yeah, but
visually.
no sim provides that.
Right.
Yeah, no sim provides the speed and the G's, and that kind of just airplane feedback. You get a little wind noise, but it's all obviously not real.
Right.
There were, I would like to think that I'm smart enough to have thought of this before, but I hadn't. So I was using VR, and I was like, yeah, cool, flying around because we had like stick and throttle, and then I was like, hey, I'll do a pattern, perfect. And then I go to lower the gear, and I like put my hand to where the gear should be. And I was like, shoot, this is an unforeseen consequence. But those are the things that you kind of need to be able to, if you really, like you said, train like you fly, XR or like a really good VR space with some haptic feedback gloves is going to be required if you're truly going to replace a cockpit, or just replace the sim bays and you still have the cockpit sitting there, but you're now just sitting in a real cockpit simulator, which has every switch that the jet would have. And then you, like you said, you just have those cutouts. So all what I imagine is the end state is at XR, you have all of your displays in the cockpit is VR images and displays from the fight you're in. And then all your hands, all your switches, everything is real world. And then you look out the window and then you see VR again, and it just seamlessly blends between each thing. Is that kind of the future of it?
I think so. I think we're getting there, and especially as more, say, consumer products in this space become available. You're talking about wearables, right? So you get your biometrics, but also the gloves that like what you're describing, kind of like jackets or suits, whatever, body suits, VR suits. I mean, all this stuff is coming out. Technology is getting better and better. Eventually, we're gonna, some other companies will start integrating all these different items together to the point where it'll be like, all right, well, you're not putting on a flight suit, but you're putting on this like VR suit or XR suit, and it's going to capture not just what you're doing inside the cockpit, but it's going to capture your biometrics as well. And then you're talking, like a huge data dump, and seeing like, all right, what is this teaching us about flying? What is this teaching us like about good pilots, great pilots, average pilots? And then compare them like with, height tracking, for example, is a whole topic in and of itself, right? So what is a great pilot looking at? Can two great pilots be looking at, two different things that, kind of like the same intervals? How does that work? So these are studies that I'm sure Air Force has already undertaken, probably not published, but things like this, there's a lot to unpack just inside the eye tracking space. And I think that intersection with the simulation world is going to continue to grow, and also with the other biometrics.
Yeah, I think, normally in our classified spaces and simulators, when things are classified, bringing in recording devices, bringing in cameras, all that stuff is kind of a non-starter. So that's going to be one of the issues with XR or AR or,
right,
like eye recording stuff. That is going to be an issue that they're going to have to, overcome, because
right. And where is it made, right?
Exactly. And that is an issue with a lot of the hardware right now, software being built in different places or hardware being built in different places. It's pretty much a no-go, and it's like, well, okay, well, we're going to start over. We saw that with a VR acquisition I did while I was on active duty. We pretty much just hit a brick wall, and it put us back like 8 months because it was like, well, that's not happening. So figure out something else. And we're like,
Right.
Okay, well, there we go, back to the drawing board. I think that is definitely the way to train people better and more efficiently in, because you think if you can put 8 of these simulators where 4 live now, I mean, that is a force multiplier. You're going to save money. You're going to be able to get more training out of them. Because a lot of times it's not that we don't have the ability to put sims. It's we don't have the space, because it has to be a classified building. It has to be, certified and all this stuff. at some point you just don't have enough buildings big enough and classified to store these things. So you're like, well, that's our limiting factor, which is a weird thing to limit you, you know?
I mean, you can just build, prefabs and, shipping containers and spec it out. And there are simulator centers that have that already. They're doing things like that. You see that in like Pendleton. It's kind of like how their whole simulation center is based on like prefabs and, shipping containers and, with everything modified inside. So, I mean, there's ways around it, but I understand there's, obviously you got space constraints.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because some of the most innovative people in the DoD, all they're doing, like their biggest innovations are just usurping the controlling entities. So like, I don't want to deal with comm, so I'm just going to run commercial network to my building.
Right.
Oh, I can't run commercial network because it's a CE owns the building and comm won't do it. Fine, I'll just build a C crate that I'll put air conditioning in, and we're just going to operate out of that. And It's like, wait, you're not fixing the problem. You're just going around the organizations that cause everyone else problems. And you're like, well, it's good for you. It just doesn't help anyone else. Right. So, cause you said you're working with the Marines and with the Air Force. How is it working with the two different branches? Just, Marines versus Air Force.
They're both, hey, the Air Force wanting, what the Air Force wants, the Air Force gets. It's no different with the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
But I think, again, the key to all not just working with DoD, but with any customer, any business, like to just make sure your requirements are defined up front. If you have the requirements defined up front, it makes things way easier for everyone. Because just, it could happen that you miss something, the customer missed something. If it's in black and white, it's on you. If it's missing, then it's on the customer. The customer needs to make a contract change. For us, we try to accommodate our customers. If it's like a half a day of work, we're like, all right, whatever, it's not even worth the time to go through the additional paperwork, right? But if it's a big scope change, obviously, we're still a commercial business. Kind of like a startup. And if you're a small business, you can't afford to take that hit by yourself.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. So when you guys are in the space, in innovation, working with other companies, are there other companies that have been helpful, kind of, helped either shepherd you in good directions or have just been helpful to kind of get your name out there?
I'd say as long as we're not competing directly, usually, yeah. I mean, like obviously Julian, we're totally different space, but is very involved in innovation. So yeah, he's been great. And other simulation companies, like like industry friends, will kind of tell each other what's happening. But we're competitors, so we're frenemies, whatever you want to call it. So we could be partners or competitors. It just depends on the opportunity. If there's a chance to partner, I always prefer that.
Yeah.
So a percentage of something is better than nothing, and it just depends on I don't want to speak crudely, but who has a bigger piece of work share depends on whose expertise is most relevant to the project, who's bringing the project, who's got the relationship with the customer. So these are things that you just have to work through with whoever you're teaming with.
Yeah,
so,
and that makes sense.
An example, you want to ask something, or you want me to get into this?
No, you're good. Yeah.
So this new contract we're lined up to get, is a teaming agreement. So we're not the prime, but our prime has the past performance and has the experience working with this end user. We had no experience working with this end user, so it's kind of like they're bringing us in, even though a lot of a good chunk of the work is software related in our space. So that's just standard for our business. I don't care if we're a sub or not, or we're the prime. That makes no difference. We just want to win and compete and help support the warfighter.
No, and as the end user, I appreciate that, and it's. I also appreciate that there's a healthy amount of competitiveness. I think, did you ever play sports back in the day?
Yeah, still do.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's something about that kind of killer instinct, if you will, in athletics, that it's like, hey, like I want to win, like I want a challenge and I want to overcome it. And, I kind of want to beat my adversary on their best day, not their worst, just so they know that it's like, yep, I won. So that's good.
Definitely comes across in everything, sports, music. So, I used to play a lot of, back in the day, I was a metal drummer. I'm still a drummer, but I'm not active,
Nice.
But it's always like, you want to play better than the other bands on the same line, on the bill. And you want to win. You want to be the best.
What's your favorite music to play? Like you said, metal. Like
music,
any specific band?
Yeah, shout out to Lamb of God for sure.
Yeah, nice. My old weapons officer. He, you know who weapons officers are?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so my old weapons officer in Masawa, he loved Lamb of God. He would just be cranking that up in the gym,
Awesome.
and it's like,
play that. For the gym, it's perfect.
Yeah.
We can have another podcast just on this, man.
Yeah, talking about music and stuff. Yeah. Well, it's funny you brought it up earlier, and it just reminded me of this thing I saw. So how, we're going to get so much data capture, whether it's with eye tracking, with our, biometrics. And I saw this video, I think it was on YouTube, but I saw this video, and it was how the Air Force was starting to capture, like having pilots wear biometrics when they go fly. And they were like, we're going to find out what like flying fighters does to the human body and what pulling G's does to the human. And then this was in the video looked like it was from like late 90s, early 2000s. And now I'm like, what happened to all that information? I wonder if the Air Force didn't use it, or if it showed bad things and they were like, we don't want to talk about that anymore.
There's definitely a lot of data that gets lost. And so there's obviously a way to improve managing the data, just making everyone aware, like even on the commercial side, you might have someone in your company, in your squadron, just, saving everything to their local PC or laptop or whatever, and it doesn't get disseminated, and it's just lost when that person moves on.
Yeah. So, well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was talking with Stuart Wagner the other day, and he said exactly that. Like this, we need to share. Like we need to reward sharing of information, because that's the only way we're going to have any useful stuff come out of it. And just kind of a random story. When I was at Masawa, they said like, don't save. This is calm. Don't save anything to your desktop. Save everything to share drive, because if you save it to the desktop, it's going to slow down your computer. Well, then 1 year, the contract for the share drive is up, and we lose access to the data. And they're like, well, you should have saved it to your desktop.
Should have backed it up.
Yeah. And I was like, God, I'm furious. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, but
they wouldn't let you get it back. It's like just gone.
Well, we didn't have access, because I think it was a contract where it was like a data lake or whatever, where, it was stored elsewhere, and we would just like access it. And we didn't have access to it anymore, and they wouldn't pay to get new, like to re-access it. So all of your data, everything you wanted, was just gone. So I just like 2015 just lost everything I had from before. And it's like, well, it's one good way to clean house.
How much was lost, man?
Well, it's crazy. Well, and like the wild thing is there's so much worthless data on military networks. It's stuff from like early 2000s, it's like 2006 Christmas party. And it's like, we definitely need this. Like if we got rid of this, it'd
archive that. And that's it, that's what we would do. Like at a certain point, just start archiving, freeing up space.
Yeah. And then, at some point, if like a document hasn't been opened in like 5 years, it's like, all right, you probably don't need it. But some people, they're hoarders of digital information.
Well, I mean, I'll save my personal photos, I think. It's just, but I'm not keeping that on the cloud forever. I'll put it on a hard drive and leave it.
Yeah. How has it been kind of, because you don't have any kind of military background, right?
I don't, no.
Yeah. So how was it kind of getting to experience the military in your way, going out to the bases, getting to talk with people, all that kind of stuff?
I love it. I enjoy it. I think when I was a kid, just wasn't aware of a lot of different opportunities. And, as I've grown up, of course, just meeting more people has been great, meeting all kinds of different people, different backgrounds. But in general, going out to the bases is great. You see what's going on, and like this is how many thousand, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. This is their day to day, and this is what they're doing to help keep our defense running. And we're just small cogs in that machine of helping that whole ecosystem. But it's very cool. I like it. I mean, going out, different bases, seeing obviously the jets take off, tearing off. It's awesome.
Yeah, they take you out to some jets.
Yeah, we're working with 4TS, or at Randolph, I'm working on the T6 program. Seeing T38s, T6, obviously not quite as exciting as the fighters, but it's still fun. I mean, even going out to Lockheed and at Fort Worth, in a meeting room, and you're seeing F-35s take off. Like, how awesome is that?
Yeah.
It doesn't get old. It's probably nothing for you, but for us, the civilian side, it's always cool.
Well, it's funny because
the whole team says the same thing. Like, oh, it's awesome. Look at that. It's just an F-18 taking off.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it never gets old for me. I'll literally like fly a jet, land, be walking back in the building, and someone will rip over top, still flying, and I'll like watch them too. I'm like, oh, sick. It's
Right.
just one of the things that I guess a lot of people may not realize is you're just so busy while you're flying the airplane, doing random things, especially when you're flying with students, that you don't get to just sit back and enjoy it very often. Sometimes you do, but there's a lot of times where you get back on the ground and you can finally like stare up. You like, or what do you fly, and what do you like to do when you're flying?
Mainly 172s, but I've flown Cirrus SR-22. I've got 1 hour in was it the flying off in the Czech jet, the Trek Channing jet, Aero Rotachodi. You know what I'm talking about? The Czech
No, I don't.
trainer jet.
No.
I forgot the name of it. Yeah, so that was really cool. I mean, it's fighter like. It's not a fighter. It's a trainer, but it's like you can do rolls and all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun. The flying is great. Using kind of like a different part of my brain. It's challenging. Definitely, don't have a lot. A few couple hundred hours, but it's a lot of prep work for me. So it's got to be very focused and locked in, and kind of like forget about everything else.
Yeah. No, it's well, you definitely have to compartmentalize, flying pretty much any airplane. So yeah. Well, when I was at pilot training, luckily I had some exposure on kind of learning how to learn and teaching people how to learn. So I kind of understood a little bit more just about the undertaking, which up until then I really hadn't had any like aggressive academic rigors. But I realized that like, hey, I can't just like sit in a chair in a room that's quiet and just like practice all of these things. Like I have to have a very dynamic environment. So what I would do is I would take a racquetball and I would dribble it. So I had to like practice dribbling a racquetball because that is difficult. And then I would practice all my call outs and practice all my checklists while I was bouncing the racquetball. And then I also have to say all these call outs and do all these things to make sure that I can do both, because I don't want, you got to practice like you play. So you need to, like, I needed something taking my
Right.
brain power and still being able to do it. So I don't know if that did help, but at least it gave me the confidence that it was helping. So maybe that by itself did something.
Yeah, there's definitely something to that. And, obviously just getting just the hours, that experience. Their 10,000 hour concept from Malcolm Gladwell. I find a lot of, I don't know about you.
Yeah, I agree.
It just makes sense. The more you do something, the better you get at it. It's common sense.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Well, I know you've got a hard out in a couple minutes, so go ahead and tell people how to contact you before we get going, so they can reach out and help increase our ecosystem.
Awesome, man. I appreciate that. So you can give me hit me up on LinkedIn. You can also shoot me an email, ARYN@SimiGon.com. Alpha Romeo Yankee November @SimiGon.com.
And then I'll add his email to the show notes. So they'll be at the bottom of the show notes if you're looking to reach out to him. And then remember, contact us at vader@kodiakshack.com if you want to provide some feedback for the show, or if you want to be on the show. And then additionally, donations are always open. And then you can also sponsor a show if you're interested. Go to info@kodiakshack.com to email us for that, and then check out our website, kodiakshack.com.
Vader, before we go, one last question. You got to answer it.
Oh, send it.
Where does a Vader call sign come from?
Yeah. Well,
promise you the answer.
Yeah, I'll give the so traditionally you only hear fighter pilot call sign names or how they got them in the bar over a beverage. But I'll give the quick overview of it. So when I was young, I would key the mic before I was ready to communicate. So everybody else other than me would just hear. And so that's how I ended up getting my call sign, because I wasn't ready to talk yet, but I was ready to push the button. So that was the bane of a lot of people's existence for a while. Hopefully I've rectified that, but good question though.
Nice.
All right, Ary, thanks for being here. Yeah. I hope everything works out for you guys.
All right. Hey, thanks for answering it. And we'll get.
Hey, thank you. All right, bye.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Vader. Keep doing what you're doing.